Part 2, addressing learning differences and stuff. I've got 2 dyslexic kids, and I've got 1 kid that has attention issues that contribute to learning difficulties. So half, 50% out of my 6. And then I've got 3 that are like typical learners. My one son with dyslexia was interested in possibly going into middle school when he was maybe in 7th or 8th grade. And I already had a relationship with the head of the special ed department because my kids had been in public school when they were younger and had already had IEPs for things like speech and stuff at the time. So I called her up to ask her what this would look like for my dyslexic son to go into school and thrive. And here's what I found out. He was going to have to come to school, get no acknowledgement of anything that we had already established as learning difficulties for him. And he would just have to go along with no extra help and no IEP till, let's see, it was for months. I think it was 3 months he was gonna have to go and prove that he would drown. Okay, so August, September, like till November. And then once we could establish that my son was drowning, then we could get an IEP meeting on the books, which would happen between 30 and 60 days out. So maybe by Christmas, we could get an IEP meeting and then put something into place to help him. Except they don't acknowledge dyslexia as a learning disability, nor do they have any approach that actually helps dyslexic kids. So the IEP that we could look forward to would be going to the special ed room for extra help, where he would be mixed in with all sorts of special needs kids with Down syndrome, kids with attention deficit, kids with Asperger's and autism, kids with behavior issues, all of that. And we're just gonna pretend like all of these various difficulties are going to be addressed in the same room at the same time effectively. I can't put my child in that situation. I had a situation at home where I could help him learn without letting his difficulties with reading and writing get in the way. We could do audiobooks. I could read out loud. We could discuss ideas and what we were learning. It didn't have to be written down. We could have big, juicy conversations, as we call them in the homeschool world, and really dig in to the stuff that we were learning. Times when we needed to write things, guess what? I could be a scribe for him. He could tell me his stuff and I could write it down. Eventually, 3 of my kids went to a special cognitive training thing that did do a lot to help them improve with their difficulties with dyslexia. And that was something that was happening during the school day. I drove for 6 months every single day. I took my 3 kids for a session half an hour from here. So it was like a 2.5-hour investment every day to help my children. That wasn't available in the schools. Maybe you have something like that in your school district. I don't know. I haven't heard of any school districts that understand how to help kids with dyslexia, and it's really common. So no, I'm sorry. Public school couldn't have given my kid a better education than I could at home because of that. Also, for my daughter that did go to public school, is a typical learner, thrives academically. She had all sorts of crazy experiences. She took AP biology in public school. They didn't even get a textbook until most of the semester was done. She had classes, let's see, in 11th, she talked about in 11th grade, because I actually called her up while I was preparing for this so I could remember it correctly. In 11th grade, they're trying to prepare for stuff and the teacher realizes 2 kids in the class don't know what nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs are, 11th grade. And so now the whole class had to go back for 2 weeks of school so that this could be addressed. I'm not saying that those kids shouldn't get that addressed. But what I'm saying is, what a drag for every other kid in the class to have to go for that ride instead of moving forward. If you're a homeschooler, guess what? If your kids have forgotten something, if your kids need review, if your kids are deficient, you can go back. You can cater it to them. And if your kids are ready to zoom ahead, you can do that too. You can't get that kind of flexibility in a typical classroom, can you? I had my oldest son, when he was in 7th grade, he was in public school and he was getting excellent grades, putting in no effort. He's a smart kid. He's a typical learner. No learning struggles whatsoever. I felt really concerned that he was kind of getting rewarded in school without learning like a work ethic or really being challenged. And I wondered if there were any sort of extra challenging classes or options or a gifted program or anything that we could put him in. And I went and I talked to the principal. And what I found out was no, they didn't have anything for kids who could go above and beyond. And what the principal said to me, very frankly, was that statistics show that when brighter kids or more, traditionally successful students are kept in a classroom, that the kids that are the most struggling tend to do a little better. And so they weren't willing to take the more thriving students out to do something else that would help enrich them. Instead, they were left in the class to potentially help enrich more struggling students. I'm not actually sure what that looked like or how it worked or if it did work, but she understood where I was coming from. She also knew our history as homeschoolers, and she said to me, my job as a public educator is to help the most kids that I can. Your job as a parent is to help your kid as much as you can. And it became very clear to me, am I going to sacrifice my child's potential in a situation like that? Am I going to let him think that life is easy A's and that he doesn't have to ever learn to study or to work harder or whatever? No. We homeschooled him the next year. And I'm not saying that the struggling kids don't deserve the help, but I'm just saying you got to think about where your priorities are and what your job is as a parent. And for me, my greatest responsibility and allegiance has to be to the kids I'm entrusted with. Going back to my daughter, she talked about when she was in history class in high school, they actually gave out packets that showed the night before the test that showed the whole test, including the answers that were multiple choice. And the kids just made up like a little song or rhyme or whatever to memorize A, B, C, whatever was the sequence for the answers. And they handed them that on a platter. And so you didn't actually have to learn. You just had to memorize the answers. That was public school. So I'm hesitant to sing the praises of this, awesome education the kids are supposedly getting in public school. I don't know. Can you get an excellent education? Sure you can. Sure you can. And for kids that want it, they'll get it anywhere, pretty much. But no, this isn't like a mecca of awesome learning or whatever. There's a lot of things broken with the system. So that's the end of part 2. We're going to go on to part 3.